Coming up next on Insights on PBS Hawaii, how should Hawaii house its prisoners? Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff from Hawaii News Now, your host for tonight's show. Hawaii ships out about 24% of all its prison inmates to one privately owned facility in Arizona. Critics say that may save money, but amounts to a crueler punishment, separating inmates from family and support essential for effective rehabilitation. Bringing the prisoners home has been a long-time goal, but are we any closer to doing so, especially with key facilities here needing modernization or even a wrecking ball? Tonight, how should Hawaii house its prisoners? We invite you to join tonight's conversation by calling 973-1000 if you live on Oahu, or 800-238-4847 if you're calling from a neighbor island. If you have a smartphone, tablet, or computer, you can watch Insights streamed live at pbshawaii.org. Just click on the Insights logo. Or you can find us on Twitter at PBS Hawaii. Please use the PBS Insights hashtag to be sure we see your tweet. Sometimes I think just phones is a lot easier. Now to our panel. Kat Brady is the coordinator for the Community Alliance on Prisons, a coalition that focuses on alternatives to incarceration. She is an advocate for prison reform. Senator Willis Sparrow represents the 19th Senate District, including Ewa Beach, Ewa, and Iroquois Point. He is the chairman of the Public Safety, Intergovernmental, and Military Affairs Committee. Nolan Espinda is the director of the State Department of Public Safety. While just confirmed by the Senate last month, he was previously, since 2009, the warden at the Halawa Correctional Facility and has been also warden at OCCC. And Robert Merce is the vice president for Internal Affairs and secretary of the board of directors of the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation, which advocates for the rights, customs, and practices of Native Hawaiian identity and culture. And let me throw out this first question to you, Kat Brady. Is the use of a mainland prison actually kind of working, if not for the prisoners? I'm sure you would argue it doesn't work well for them, but for the criminal justice system, the taxpayers, and the general public?
No, I don't think it really does, because it's very hard to actually manage a population that's thousands of miles away. So what happens is there's a contract, and the state monitors. They send a team every quarter to the prisons. But my understanding from the men who are in Saguaro is that the monitors never speak to the men. They only talk with the staff. So I think that's a problem. The other problem is that the majority of people who are in Arizona are Native Hawaiian. They're thousands of miles from their loved ones, from their homes, from their ancestral lands. I was in Arizona in 2007. We couldn't have picked a place that is more foreign to our people. It's like the moon, hard-packed soil, middle of the desert.
Okay, Nolan Espinda, as a director of public safety, do you feel that overall the system is working okay?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us here tonight. I must say the situation dating back to 1995 was dire in regards to overpopulation in our prison system. Our prison system houses approximately 46% of our male prison inmates in Arizona. That's a dramatic need for more beds in prison system. However, it must be also recognized that we are a unicameral system that houses a jail population of the state, and our jail population is a dramatic problem in that we are about 159% over capacity in every one of our jail institutions.
Just to get clear, the difference between a jail and a prison.
The jail essentially houses people who are being held there without, who can't make bail, who have been sentenced to short periods of time, a year or less, and are under the jurisdiction of the courts, the judiciary of Hawaii.
Oh, okay, so they're not, they haven't been convicted of felonies yet, they haven't been incarcerated for long periods of time, they're just there for a short time.
They may have been convicted of felonies but are on probation, and essentially it is a pre-trial and misdemeanor population.
Let me still stick with the first question now for Senator Sparrow. Do you think that overall, I mean, we've been with this system for quite some time now. We were just talking about 4 different governors have been involved. Do you think it basically works?
Well, it is working. However, it was supposed to be temporary in nature. It was done because of our overcrowding and the possibility that the federal government might come in and take some action against the state. So over the years, we've attempted to look at new facilities and look where we could build something that would accommodate these individuals. We haven't been able to come to any agreement. At this stage, though, we're going to look at it closely again with the EGA administration. And an important part of that equation is the literally tens of millions of dollars that are being spent on the mainland. And those dollars should be spent locally within our government system, with our vendors here, and circulating within our economy.
Robert Burris with Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation. What do you see as the major drawbacks to having so many prisoners on the mainland?
A number of studies have been done in Canada, Florida, and Minnesota, which uniformly, even those are independent studies, show that if you don't have regular visitation during your period of incarceration, first of all, your chances of recidivism or going back to prison increase by 13%. And if you have visits, then your chances of recidivism go way down. And so literally, if you take an inmate from Hawaii and say, you are one of the people we've chosen to send to Arizona, where you can, because of financial reasons, you're not going to be in contact with your family, your chances of coming back to prison have just gone up dramatically and significantly.
Do you have numbers, though, to back that up? I mean,
Yes.
are we really, with the system of Mainland and Hawaii, are we worse than other systems in terms of recidivism, or are we about the same as other prison systems?
Well, we're actually worse in terms of recidivism. There is some balance between the people who recidivate here and who come back into prison from who've been in Hawaii versus the mainland, but the statistics are pretty uniform. That if you have a mentor in particular, if you have a regular visit from a mentor, your chances of recidivism go down by 30%. So what we need to do is make sure that there's continuity with the family and with relatives of these men from the time they go in to the time they go out.
Let me ask Director of Public Safety, Nolan Spinda, do you think that, have you compared, or has the state compared the recidivism level here compared to other states? I mean, do we know whether our system is working better in that, by that measure?
There are studies that show we have a recidivism rate that exceeds many states. It doesn't exceed others. However, it has a lot to do with how strict we are in regards to when we bring people back, alternative programming options that are available to parolees and things of that nature. So, the reality is, when we think about the use of the mainland prison from an operational point of view, we are looking at a situation, as Senator Sparrow said, if we were to bring them back and not have proper housing for them, we'd be looking at a situation of tremendous overcrowding. So from that perspective, CCA, who is our current contractor, has been a tremendous corporate partner in assisting the taxpayers of Hawaii of not getting sued and having the Department of Justice take over our whole system.
We'll get on to more of the prison reform, that sort of stuff a little bit later, but in terms of dollars and cents, is it cheaper, or is that just a hard measurement to make?
That's a softball that I could say very easily. It's it's $73 a day to house the inmates in Arizona and $137 a day here. But that's not a fair assessment, because it's not necessarily just the money. As Will said, it's about $48 million a year of money that should be stay in Hawaii and be spent by the taxpayer money here in Hawaii.
Kat Brady, you were nodding your head vigorously at those figures and actually agreeing with Mr. Espinda on that. What do you think?
The social costs are huge. Keeping people separated from their loved ones, from their families, from anything they know is not a good thing. And as Bob mentioned, we know recidivism is enhanced when visitation is not happening. So we know these things. The social cost for sending people abroad has just been amazing. And we know that kids whose parents are incarcerated are 6 or 7 times more likely to be incarcerated themselves. So it's really difficult when a child's dad is in Arizona, or when we had the women in Kentucky and all the other places we had them. Very difficult for the kids to actually talk or have some kind of meaningful conversation. And the video visits have like a tape delay. So it's really difficult for the kids to talk because their voice comes back to them, and it's really difficult for them to keep connected.
Senator Espero, I want to throw this at you again, and I don't want to sound like I'm asking the same question over and over again, but, criminal justice systems are complicated mechanisms. Yes, and I've actually heard, in the past, not recently, that some inmates preferred the mainland prisons to highly crowded, sometimes not that well-managed facilities over here. Have you also heard that? I mean, do you think that we can make a universal statement that it's bad for everybody?
Well, it's probably the case that a few of them do want to stay there, but my guess is the vast majority, those from Hawaii, with family in Hawaii, with a wife or children, they want to be closer to their loved ones. I think that's probably the norm, and we should do our best to get all of our inmates back. I remember when I took over the Public Safety Committee, we had approximately 2,100 inmates on the mainland. We have brought that figure down now to about 1,400. So we're going in the right direction. And even our prison population, it was maybe close to 6,100, and now, as you mentioned, 5,700 plus. So we're looking at ways where we can better deal with our inmates, and if necessary, not have them in incarcerated situations, more community-based programming services. Certainly there are individuals, violent ones and others, who deserve to be in prison. But for those that are nonviolent, maybe some that have drug problems or mental health problems, unfortunately, many of our inmates have mental health problems, and we need to look at how we can better deal with them and improve their situation and make it better for the prison system.
The mental health system is a whole other weakness of our infrastructure. Bob Mers from Native Hawaiian Legal. Can you talk specifically about the issue of the cultural separation for the Native Hawaiian inmates? As I think Nolan mentioned, you've literally got a majority of Native Hawaiians, is that correct, that are in that Arizona prison? What kind of things are happening there? Are there efforts to help them, culturally?
Well, there are some efforts to help them culturally over there. Unfortunately, Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation feels that they're not nearly enough. And even though I can't really talk about it, we have filed a major lawsuit against the state of Hawaii, the Department of Public Safety, and Corrections Corporation of America. It's a class action suit basically alleging that Hawaiians are not provided with adequate opportunity to engage in cultural practices in violation of both statutes and the federal Constitution. It's a class action suit in federal court, and I can't talk about the merits of it because it's going to go to trial next month. But it's vitally important, and we just need to get, we need to maximize that ability of Native Hawaiians who are over there or over here, but hopefully bring them all back. We were just at the closing makahiki, and this is at Halawa, and it was done under started under Nolan's administration over there, and the men just love this. They love to learn the language. They love to learn the oles. They love to learn the dances. And they love to practice the makahiki. And once in a while, they even get Hawaiian food. And if you've ever seen these men when they participate in their culture and they see themselves as Hawaiian, it's just an amazing and beautiful thing to see. And we need a whole lot more of that. But there is some of it going on. It just should be increased.
Let me, I've got a number of questions here, and I'd like to honor our listeners who do bring in some interesting points. And I'm getting a lot of outrage about why are we in this position? The one says, sending prisoners into exile is illegal and we should bring them home now. If the situation has been this bad since the mid-1990s, why haven't we addressed this yet? If the data is there, why hasn't the state built more prisons or created better social programs? Senator, you've been in the legislature and you mentioned that it's hard to do. What's the holdup? Why is this not a no-brainer?
Well, for starters, it is not illegal. What we are doing is legal. But when you look at the state budget and state government, prison and inmate issues are competing with schools, universities, healthcare, social services, the environment, transportation, you name it. There are literally thousands of CIP or wishes financially, and we just don't have the money to pay for everything. So it's going to take political leadership. The previous governor, Governor Abercrombie, had put out some requests for information and requests for proposals on looking at building another prison and working on bringing back the prisons. But with his loss, now we're in essence starting all over. And we just need to have the political will, because to build another prison, for example, if that's one route we want to do, or a re-entry facility, it could cost anywhere from $50 million to $250 million.
Let me ask Nolan Despinda, what is the administration position on this now?
Well, we want to continue all efforts that were started previously, but I must say, and granted the subject of tonight is the prison population in Hawaii, but our true dramatic need for the inmate population in Hawaii is our overcrowded jails. We have the relief valve of allowing some of our prison inmates to be on the mainland, which allows our prisons to operate at about 90% capacity, which is what the American Correctional Association recommends. However, our jail population, which is burgeoning, and we have very little control over that since the judiciary controls it. Like I said, we're about 160% at capacity. So when you prioritize issues in regards to the potential for litigation and actual overcrowded conditions, really our jail population is our real primary and first need right now.
I think let's explore that a little bit later, a little bit more when we talk about reform and where reform needs to be. What I'm curious about right now, so the administration, and I think the governor has stated that he'd like to look into building a facility, and he's mentioned public-private partnership. Is the administration exploring having a private prison in Hawaii?
Well, my response to that is that for the first time in years, legislature has really taken the lead on what direction we want to take in regards to any prison construction, and it's very heartening to see that, because we can expect that something will actually get done. We have initiated things in the past by trying to educate and make our point ourselves, but essentially we'd get down to a point where there'd be a not in my backyard attitude, or simply, as Will said, not enough money to do it.
And regarding the public-private partnership, the thought is only with the construction phase.
Sure.
Right, that yes, nobody at the legislature, no one on the 5th floor is talking about a privately operated prison or jail in Hawaii.
Because in that sense, all construction projects are public-private partnerships. So when someone knowledgeable like David Ige says public-private partnership, the signal seems to be he's willing to work with a provider who would come in and build the prison in return for the revenue of taking care of the prisoners.
Well, basically, when we talk about a public-private partnership, key point of that is that the entity, the private entity, comes up with financing. See, you're right, with all of our projects, whether they're roads, schools, whatever facilities, they're built by private companies. We don't have a public construction company. So everything goes out to bid, the private sector bids on them. But in a public-private partnership, we're talking about company A, for example, may say, we have $200 million in financing set up. It's there, the money is there. Now we just want to be able to come up and work in agreement with you, the state of Hawaii. You provide the land, which is what everybody's talking about and looking at, and we'll build it, and we'll own it, and you pay us back over a 30-year period, after which time you will own the facility.
Just for the space then, not for the operation of the system?
Well, construction only.
Right,
but it would still be a state-operated and have union employees as we currently have in our state.
Do you feel...
So, I wanted to jump in on one of the questions where it said, how did we get to this place? We got to this place because in the 90s there was this big push for 3 strikes, truth in sentencing under the Clinton administration. I mean, sending, hundreds of thousands of people to jail and prison. That's how we got here. And the Vera Institute has just done this huge kind of retrospective of all these criminologists and researchers to look at how did we get here? Where are we now? So the National Institute of Sciences just came out with a report that actually showed that what we're doing is completely unsustainable. We cannot keep doing this. We're incarcerating people for behavior that we don't like. So when you look at Europe and other countries, they do not incarcerate people for the Menini things that we do here. They send people to treatment, to community programs, those kinds of things that directly address those people's pathways to their troubles.
You know, I just got a very interesting, very knowledgeable question here. It says, regarding recidivism rates, it is 54% for inmates housed in state versus 51% for inmates housed out of state. So the argument that the physical visitation helps recidivism rates isn't supported by this data from the Interagency Council for Public Safety.
I don't know that data, but I would be very surprised if it's valid, in that it would be inconsistent with every study that's been done anywhere in the United States or Canada.
Let me just, for the sake of viewers, the word recidivism, that basically means someone who reoffends after being released. Nolan Espinda, does this number ring a bell with you, or?
Well, we all know the old saying about statistics, and you know, by all measures, including the baseline developed by the federal government, recidivism has to do with being re-arrested for a crime. I think on the bigger, more realistic perspective, we look at anyone who is any sentenced felon who is returned to prison, whether it's for a technical parole violation or being arrested for a new crime. So, depending on how you define the term recidivism, the data can be completely and totally different.
Go ahead.
And let me say that I believe, and many of us believe, that a recidivism rate of 51, 55% is too high. Okay, what that tells us is that half of those who are in prison now are going to be released and go back. That's why it's so important that we have to look at the reentry, the rehabilitation, the programming available to these inmates. Because once they're in our custody, we need to do everything we can within our power to give them the skills, to give them the tools that are necessary to become productive members of our society. Whether that's, working on their education, drug treatment, mental health, whatever the situation. Because if we don't invest in these items, then that recidivism rate is going to stay the same. And at one point in time, I believe it was in the 60s plus. So we should get that down to 25%, 30%, and that's why there's a balance on how much we put into the facility versus how much we actually put into programming.
And that's a point that I think that let's get into after a break. We'll take a break in about 5 or 6 minutes. What I'd like to explore a little bit more, though, is there something bad about having a private operator operate a prison? Or is it just because the unions will not support it? The Constitution doesn't like privatization much either, but I'm just curious, Kat Brady, do you feel like if you had a private operator in Hawaii operating a prison, that would be a bad thing versus what we have now?
Yes, I do, actually, because I think profiting from people's misery is immoral. And I think a private prison is there to make money. It's all about the stock market. It's all about the stock prices. At one point, when private prisons were kind of in the mid-90s, they actually had the stock price up in the visitors' room.
Robert Burst, do you think that private prison guards would do a better job or a worse job than public prison guards?
I don't think that's really the issue. I think either one could do a good job, but I agree completely with Kat that it's just not the right thing to have these private operators. I was just reading about Norway, for example, where the people who work in their prisons, they have, of course, a national prison system, and they have an academy where if you want to work in the prisons, you go to the academy and you have to graduate after 2 years of training in order to work in the prisons, so that you know something about ethics, about psychology, about human rights, and things like that. And frankly, I'd like to see that kind of development here, where we really are willing to pay people to work in the prisons, and we pay them not just to maintain order in the prison, but to help with rehabilitation, and we send skilled people to work with them and set a good example instead of setting kind of often a brutal example.
A real quick question. and for Nolan Espinda, please have panel members discuss the possibility of having the prisoners themselves decide whether they are incarcerated here or in the mainland. Is that even a manageable idea?
Well, no, because
That's a straight answer.
that's a choice that, as Will expressed earlier, given your druthers with your feet here on the ground, you're going to want to stay. We have a sophisticated process determining who's going to go to the mainland, who, as opposed to staying here, who will return from the mainland once every 4 months, which we schedule all of our movements, and it's all based on their progress through the system towards parole and furlough program.
Let me ask this question, Senator Espero. Do you think you made the statement about that a private prison wouldn't be acceptable? Is it there a consensus though that we need to build a facility equivalent to housing all the inmates we have now, or is it possible that we may need a much smaller facility if all the other things can work?
Well, one issue that's currently on the table in real time is OCCC. And one idea and thought is to tear down OCCC and replace it with a newer, modern facility. And that's being considered in the Halawa area.
Let me ask a question that just came in via my ear, actually. And that is, how is it that inmates are determined to be on the mainland or be here?
The short answer to that is the more time you're scheduled to serve, based on the sentence from the court in combination with the Hawaii Paroling Authority's minimum sentence, the more the opportunity for you to go mainland. And generally speaking, we try and bring you back to continue your end-term programming when you're about 24 months away from potential parole.
Is it your feeling that the programming that goes on for those long-term inmates there is good enough, given that it's being done by a contractor?
Well, again, given our druthers, we'd have everybody back home here, no doubt about that. However, this prison on the mainland that we have, a single prison where we house all of our inmates, does an adequate job. They meet the contractual requirements that we put on them every 3 to 4 years. And the housing situation there is actually commensurate with anything across the country. So short of being back home, they are in good condition. And like I said, were they to be force-fed into our system back here in Hawaii, the taxpayers of Hawaii would suffer.
And Senator Sparrow, what's a realistic timeline for this? It doesn't look like you guys are going to make a decision. The legislature is going to make a decision this year, right? At this stage.
Well, I would like to think that we do have a resolution moving, and I know Governor Ige and Nolan have been already in discussion and working on this. It's conceivable that within the next 4 years, we could have a new facility. It's possible. Or another option, I've been one who's been pushing for a re-entry facility. A facility that's primarily geared towards rehabilitation, programming, helping inmates and even those on parole and probation. That could be done in a shorter time frame. It really depends on what we want, where we're going to build it, and at what cost.
But those 3 questions can take forever to answer, can't they?
They could take forever, but I believe the key players in government, and especially those within the current administration, understand that this has been an issue that's been lingering for a long time.
Hopefully we won't be here next year asking the same question.
Because when Governor Ige was a senator, we were dealing with these same issues as well. So
Kat, I know you wanted to jump in. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Senator. Yeah.
No, I just think the reentry law that passed in 2007, Senator Sparrow's bill, actually talks about the first day somebody's incarcerated, we should be working on their reentry. So they should be programmed, accordingly. And what the federal system does that's really good is they sit people down, they ask them, what are your job skills? What have you done before? And then they program that person according to what that person knows how to do, so that that person could actually get a real job when they get out. So if we actually did that and we started programming people from the day they went in, we would reduce recidivism, because people would actually have a plan. They'd know what they were going to do when they would get out. They would, have job skills.
Let me,
hopefully a little
just-
gate money.
I got a quick question from a viewer. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting people too much tonight. I think too much coffee.
That's right.
I apologize. But a quick question for Nolan has been, because there's a lot of questions that are coming in that are sort of nuts and bolts questions about how we do this, which I think is the interest that the public has. Do we release inmates home before they're released, or do we release them in Arizona? So there is a process, though. You bring them home for a while prior to them being released, right? No one is released straight into Arizona. Arizona probably wouldn't care for that much.
We've had inmates request to be released in Arizona, but very, very few. Our process is to bring them back for reentry programming. And I said, like I said earlier, it normally targets about the 24-month mark where we bring them back and put them at Kulani or Waiawa for a period of time prior to qualifying for furlough on their island of commitment.
Okay, I'll get back to you, Bob. I have to remind our viewers that tonight we're discussing how Hawaii houses its prisoners now and in the future. Please call, email, or tweet your questions and comments. Call 973-1000 if you live on Oahu, and 800-238-4847 if you're on a neighbor island. I'm sorry, Robert Merce.
No, I was just saying, in terms of building a new prison, which they are talking about, they're talking about tearing down OCCC and building some kind of a facility well, talk is that it would be in Halawa, but that's not been decided. I just want to say that we talk about a new facility. That should be the end of the process. So you don't even want to start thinking about the facility, the structure, the building, until you've looked at a whole bunch of other questions. And what we need to do is to get the will to reduce the population of our prison and the incarceration rate. And the way we have to do that is, first of all, to focus on things in the judiciary that we can change, like mandatory minimum sentences. We need to look at doing things like California did, where they took low-level felonies, our Class C felonies, and converted them into misdemeanors. And so those people typically don't go to prison. And there's a lot of things we can do that would start bringing that number, that both the incarceration rate and the prison population down. And then we start looking at programs. How do we want to address this in terms of rehabilitation? And let's figure all of that out. And once you get all of those things in place, only then would you start thinking about what do you want to build, because before you have to know those things before you start building, because otherwise we'll end up with another big facility. It'll be here in our community for another 40 or 50 or 60 years, and it will determine our correctional policy instead of our thinking determining what the building is going to be like.
If you build it, they will put them there.
Daryl,
Exactly right.
But you do need to understand that this talk about this replacement facility, the OCCC, has nothing to do with the prison population. It would not bring back a single prison inmate. It would simply serve the same purpose that OCCC is serving right now. So we really cannot get confused about the resolution of our prison population problem comparative to our jail population problem.
You know, and I've been putting you off on that point, and I want to give you the opportunity now that when you talk about the jail population and you talk about the courts and these folks being under the control of the judiciary and basically being housed by public safety, describe how big an issue that is. Why is it such a significant issue, and what do you think needs to be done to fix it?
Well, because we're in a system that we're all together, unlike 40, there's six states like us, 44 others that have county jails and local law enforcement and local judiciary. They have a tie-in into how many beds and everything they use. We have a system where everybody's under one umbrella. So the courts simply put in as much people as they deem necessary for the public safety, as well as holding people over for trial. And their expectation is that public safety will properly manage them. The legislature will properly provide for the amount of space that's needed. So it's really a hand-holding situation for all of us to get together. But one cannot do without the other, and we end up being at the tail end. And like I said, at 159% of our capacity, and I'm the director of the whole department, not just our prison department. I'm director of the whole department, so I do need to prioritize our problems.
Well, let me, on that point, so are you saying that, for example, bails are too high, or the wait is too long to go to trial, or what?
Those are all public policy issues.
Right.
We are here to enforce the law and safely provide for the people that the court send to us. We hope our partners will assist in those public debate issues, and we're more than willing to speak up, but we don't make policy.
Okay,
we enforce policy.
the rest of the panel.
One of
go
the
ahead.
problems is that the last director talked about 30% of OCCC is filled with houseless people. And we know that there's a high percentage of people who have mental illnesses. This is insane. The prison, the corrections department is actually now the de facto public health or public
It's a social
institution.
I might not agree with our number, but I do agree with the
But
principle.
that is a
It really
huge
is,
problem
yeah.
because that is not what their mission is. So we have people who are not trained to deal with people who are coming in with all sorts of problems.
Senator Spur.
And the issue of policy, as Nolan noted, is certainly something that we have been addressing. So, for example, under the previous governor, we started this Justice Reinvestment Initiative, and Kat and others were involved in that. And we did look at probation and parole. And what we found that in probation, on average, our inmates were staying longer in probation than those on the mainland. So that was something we addressed. We also looked at the bail process, and we found out that there were delays in our processing of inmates, and we looked at speeding that process up so that they're not sitting pre-trial longer in jail than they have to.
Or waiting for bail.
Or waiting for bail,
Yes,
right.
yes.
I've been a strong advocate of electronic monitoring. That's something we could use with our work furlough, with our parolees, with probationers, and we just haven't had enough traction on that. And now this session there is a bill looking at the theft threshold. From felony to misdemeanor. Right now it's $300, and we're hoping to raise that figure so that would make fewer individuals go directly to prison, and we could look at other ways of dealing with their problems.
Robert Murstow, when I hear this, I can hear people saying, "Oh, but you're going to let out a bunch of criminals."
How?
By for example, reducing felonies to misdemeanors, and by
Sure. And I hope we do, because we can't afford and we can't sustain the levels we have now. I was just looking at some recent statistics. If Hawaii was a country, we would be in the top percentage, the very top percentage of incarcerators in the entire world. The countries that would be just above us would be the Russian Federation and Kazakhstan. We incarcerate so many of our people that it is a real disgrace. And we don't need to do that because a lot of them are not violent. And there's a lot of things we could do because we need to look at all the alternatives to incarceration. And we don't have good. If I was in charge, one of the first things I'd do is say to the judges, you don't want to send people to prison. What do you want us to provide you in terms of alternatives? Why don't we do those simple things? That would just make so much sense. And most of the people who are in prison are not violent people. They don't have a long criminal history. Many of the ones who are violent have done something terrible once in their life and have been in for 35 or 40 years. And there's one other issue I want to mention just in terms of our population. I've been working for the last couple of years trying to find placement, working with the department to find placement for some of these inmates who are old and are aging out. They have stage 4 lung cancer, end-stage liver disease, and nobody wants them, and they're still in prison today, even though they've been paroled for over a year. I was recently out, I met with a man, the public defender asked me to talk to him. He has dementia. I said, I won't use his name, but I said, Mr. So-and-so, I said, why are you here? He says, I don't know. My son dropped me off here and said he was going to come pick me up, and I'm waiting for him. And I said,
Let me ask Nolan Espinda, you've been in the system a long time and know the inmate population probably better than anybody that I can think of. Would you agree that something like half the people who are incarcerated now would be safe to release into the community?
No, because the word safe is a very subjective term. A lot of what we're talking about is quality of life issues for the people who are law-abiding citizens. So we may categorize certain crimes as nonviolent, but it may be the person that robs your house while you're at work or while your children are at school. There are crimes that after repetition, incarceration really is the only answer. I'm just expressing an opinion. This is a public debate issue. It's a judicial issue. And we support all reasonable alternatives, but ultimately my job as a Department of Public Safety Director is to incarcerate those that are directed towards me.
Senator Sparrow.
And let me state, when we're talking about releasing somebody or not having someone incarcerated, we're looking at it from one easy way is the cost. So if we have someone in prison, it's $134 a day. But if we take that same person and they don't have to be incarcerated, we could take, instead of $134, and now take $70 or $90 and put that into programming and assistance and helping that individual. And interesting enough, regarding your question on 51 or 50% that shouldn't be, I've had some conversations with some UPW employees, and I just had some visitors in my office, about a dozen of them, 2 weeks ago. And some of their opinion is that maybe the figure could be anywhere from 10 to 20% of our current population doesn't need to be in prison, and they could be in community-based programming and other alternatives. That figure would equate to 600 plus inmates, and that could certainly help in our overcrowding, save us some money, and spending the money more wisely.
I'm sorry, I know Ken is just wanting to jump in here. Just so I get a sense of the scale, and this reminded me because Senator Sparrow mentioned this number, right? So 10, 20%, you're talking about 600 inmates. When we talk about this population that is in jail, how large of our population are we talking about?
Well, we have a jail capacity of a little bit over 1,600 beds, which means if every jail inmate is occupying every single bed, there'd be 1,610 inmates in bed. We actually have at this given time 2,400 inmates in our jail system.
So 1/3 of all the people we have incarcerated actually have not been sentenced.
In our jail system, they have either not been sentenced or they are serving sentences of less than 1 year.
So that's a very large portion of our population.
Those are the people sleeping in day rooms, sleeping in the library, sleeping 3 in a cell.
In the conditions in OCCC, what we're talking about.
At every CCC.
Okay.
So I wanted to say,
Sure.
Incarceration does not disappear our social problems. Okay, we know that we have social problems. It doesn't disappear them. What it does is it disappears the people struggling with those problems. People who have drug addiction, people who are mentally ill, people who are illiterate, people who are houseless. So it disappears them, but it doesn't disappear the problem. And that's the problem, because I think a lot of people just think, oh, just get rid of them, put them away. And the department has no option to say, no, we don't really want that guy. They get who they get, and they have to deal with that.
Okay, now for the next, we've got about 10 or 15 minutes more to go, and I've got a big pile of questions here, so forgive me if I am not able to maintain a continuity, because I want to do these questions because there's good questions. One person writes in, nothing is being said about the Laumaka furlough program. What about this issue in connection with the topic? I think that the question there for Nolan Espinda is, and maybe for others, are you actually all that good at predicting whether someone is going to reoffend? I think the Laumaka issue, the work furlough issue, came to light recently because we've had inmates offend and walk off while on that program. Are we good at predicting their behavior?
Well, we're not perfect, obviously. Since the last the last 12 months from March of 2014 to present, we've had 355 people participate in that program. We've had 22 people walk away. Walk away is essentially not complying with your contract. They did not commit another crime. They did not, break into someone's home. These 22 people simply failed to return, maybe relapsed into drug use, because it's a furlough program, we are 100% about notifying the public about these things. So it seems very high profile. We've had 4 people in the last calendar year recidivate. and actually commit new crimes. So 4 people out of 355, and I don't like pointing to statistics, but it's about a 1% rate. And of those 4 people who recidivated, 3 of them were actually incarcerated for nonviolent crimes.
Okay, let me another question. Okay, go ahead.
And unfortunately, in the last 2 weeks, people were seeing like maybe 1 every other day, so that really gave it a black eye, the work furlough program. But it is a successful program. On May 19th, we're going to be having an informational hearing at the Capitol on the work furlough program and review it and go over it and see how we can improve it, strengths and weaknesses. So that will be Tuesday at the Capitol, and I am expecting it to be taped live as well. So people should stay tuned for that one.
You know, there's also a quick question here. Please discuss overtime and staffing levels, chronic issue. It brings up whether, as a state, we're even able to manage this issue. Yeah, Senator Sparrow's pointing at you. He's your best friend, I can tell. But no, Senator Sparrow, you've actually been there on the hot seat on this issue. And what do you think is going on there? Why is it that we can't deal with that? And if we can't deal with that, how do we deal with some of the really big, hard questions?
Well, it has to do with labor contracts. It has to do with the current environment within our prisons and jails. It has to do with MOUs that are made between the wardens and the unions. And at the end of the day, just the training and the work ethic of our employees. And I've had several conversations with Director Spinda on this. He understands the gravity of the problem and the issue. Unfortunately, it's not one that we can easily resolve. We've tried many things. We've had hearings. We've cut their overtime budget. And ultimately, the management must decide these overtime issues on who gets it and who doesn't.
Interesting question, though, for Nolan and Spinda is, do you think that the legislature is not giving you enough money to deal with these questions? I mean, is there money at the programming level that you could use more?
No, they've been very generous especially regarding reentry and justice reinvestment monies channeled our way. So, no, I would not say they need to give us more money for those particular programs.
I could tell you.
Oh, I think we always need program money because there are not enough programs, and one of the problems is there's not enough space.
I was going to say there's not much room for them.
Yeah, and that's been a huge problem.
Because one of the issues with visitations has always been, well, if we. That's the one time in the week where you've cleared out the space for the visitations, right? That's kind of an ongoing problem.
Well, Daryl, I'd like to point out and take the opportunity to give kudos to my staff because since January 1st, we've had a single visit cancellation due to staffing shortage at the Kulani Correctional Facility.
And you changed that policy, right? You actually decided to pay the overtime.
That's not
right?
the situation at all. The people in the correctional system have just made a committed decision towards the importance of this significant program, and every week we work on it. We plan, we take the steps necessary to make sure it happens.
Okay, an important question now. My niece went to prison for drugs. By the time she was released, she had no money, no skills that she could have learned if they'd been available, and the only people she knew were ex-cons. It's sad. How can we fix this, Robert Merce?
Well, that's not an easy question to answer, or a short answer.
It was just your turn.
Okay. The obvious answer is, number one, looking at that situation, should she have been in prison to begin with? I think it's a good question. And maybe the answer is yes, and maybe the answer is no. If she had a drug problem, was there diversion that could have been used as opposed to incarceration? And did we maybe make a mistake and overlook an alternative to incarceration for this particular person? Assuming that this is someone who should have gone to prison, yes. We are not committed to rehabilitation. We are committed to retribution and punishment. So, we're going to have a repeat of that exact question from now indefinitely into the future unless we change our viewpoint and say that yes, when these people come in with drug problems, A, we're going to deal with the drug problems, but B, they have huge other problems, and we have to take care of those.
You know, next question on that point exactly. What safety net does the state have for inmates when released? Can they get welfare or Medicaid? Do they add to the numbers of homeless? We know for a fact that some of them do walk out after serving their sentence and become homeless. And is there a restriction? Can a felon get welfare? Can a felon get?
Yes.
I know they can get Medicaid.
They can.
So is that something for the state, or is that?
Well, you know, I mean, here's part of the problem is you can't get Medicaid while you're in prison, and you can't even apply for it while you're in prison. You can get it the day you walk out the front door. So yes, if the person is released and they need that kind of financial assistance, they can get it, and in some cases we can expedite them getting it, though not all cases. And that's something we need to work on. And in fact, some of us are meeting with Rachel Wong, the new director of Public
Department of Human
Services next week to talk about that exact problem. But there's a lot of things we need to do. They can get those things, but they're kind of difficult and they take too long.
You know, Nolan, it's been and Kat, I know you want to jump in on that, but do we have a societal attitude toward people that have been in prison that makes their life so much difficult when they get out?
I think we all know that there's a certain stigma associated with being incarcerated. But I must tell you, on the positive note, our furlough program statewide have regular employers that routinely pick up these people who come out, and we're grateful and celebrate that every year.
Okay.
And you know, work furlough is something, this lady whose niece got out of prison, that's something, you know, nobody should walk out the gate with nothing, no skills. That's why people need that half step. You know, that's why they need that step, they need that work furlough to sort of get used to being in the community. It's difficult. If you've been in prison 10 years and then you come out, the world is different. So we really need to help people make that transition. So something like that would have helped her. I've worked with many women who went to prison for drugs and then got out, no treatment, no anything, relapsed, went back, but the second time actually got drug treatment and then work furlough and then really succeeded in.
You know, what strikes me is that what you folks are describing, and all of you seem to be in consensus on this, is that this is a problem that has many facets, many angles. It ripples out into our social services structure. It ripples out into our educational system, I'm sure, into our
Health system,
labor, all these things. Do we have enough brains working together on this problem right now in Hawaii to actually make some progress? Senator Espero, what do you think about that?
Oh, certainly. Just like any other problems, there are multiple stakeholders with multiple ideas, whether it's prison issues, you know, the homeless, healthcare. And sometimes part of the problem is there are so many people with so many ideas, it's hard to get a consensus on one. But I think we're in the right direction in terms of we need to provide more money for re-entry rehabilitation, and we need to provide support to the inmates and the families.
Let me ask this other question, and I think Director Espinza got to there. A quick story, and I probably shouldn't tell a story, but as a reporter covering courts, I often watch judges who were forced to choose between probation and 10 years in prison. And those were the only two choices the judges had, nothing in between. How big an issue is that, do you think? I know you'd say it's a policy, but you're a very knowledgeable person. I'd like to know what your opinion is about that.
You know, that's a challenge. There's nothing that prohibits a judge from giving somebody probation or 9 months in prison on a 10-year prison term, but they do evaluate the particular case. So it's not an all or nothing situation. Judges have tremendous leeway and decision-making authority in these matters. So I've even seen Class A felons get probation. So it really is dependent, as he talked about the single crime once in a lifetime. Judges use their discretion, and they ought to.
Senator Espero, do you feel that our sentencing structure is antiquated and built too much toward long prison terms?
It's in need of a review, certainly, and we need to do an overhaul where we can and see where we need to straighten things and maybe be a little more liberal in other areas.
Do you think, Kat Brady, you've been pushing for reforms for many, many decades, and I'm just wondering, do you think the legislature has the will to face off with the folks who will say you're being soft on crime?
Well, you know, I think the market crash of 2008 has changed people, and they realize that we cannot We cannot build our way out of this. And that's one of the problems, and I think that's what Bob was saying. We need to do a lot of analysis of the policies that are incarcerating people, and then how to actually deal with that in the most effective way that will keep people from going back.
And we're at a crossroads right now. I mean, if we build a huge prison or any type of, these big capital expenditures, you get yourself locked in. So this is the time, I think, to stop and look at the judiciary and get the Chief Justice involved, perhaps, and members of the judiciary. Get the legislature is already engaged, but we also need to get the community engaged. And we haven't done a good enough job at that. And that's something that I'm interested in. I think the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation is interested in getting the community engaged to help understand and see these problems, and then they'll support us. And if they support us, then I think the legislature will be on our side and we can make some progress.
And the Chief Justice has been a big supporter of justice reinvestment.
Yeah.
And that is something in all the states where justice reinvestment has been truly implemented. They've saved money. They took prison construction off the books. There are things that we can do. Unfortunately, Hawaii is way behind on actually doing
and
justice
Nolan Espina, I'm going to give you the last word here. Are you hopeful?
I am hopeful, especially with the legislative initiatives that are coming out this year regarding the replacement facility of OCCC. I am hopeful regarding continued success in our prison system regarding using the use of the justice reinvestment.
Okay, thank you so much. Great panel. And now for next week, astronomers have long used Mauna Kea as an ideal location from which to explore the universe. Many Native Hawaiians cherish the volcanic mountain as a sacred place to be treated with reverence. Next week on Insights, should astronomy-related development on Mauna Kea continue? That's next time on Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Ahui ho.